Now, there's a difference between busy and productive. So that's why I said there's a chance. So I know people that are scheduled out with silly stuff, right? But so if you focus on the high priority items, you pick your targets, everything is aligned with your target, and you schedule those, then you're set up for success. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, 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 welcome. Hopefully when you hear those welcomes, you know what time it means. It's time to be welcomed in to the one and only Life of a CISO with yours truly. Dr. E is in the house. How you doing today? I hope the answer is awesome, right? Because I'm doing awesome. You know what I'm doing awesome? Because I get to spend the next 30 minutes with you. Woohoo! Yeah, I'm in a good mood. I'm always in a good mood when I get to record my Life of a CISO. Also, depending on when you're listening to this, if you're listening to this sort of in order when they're released, hopefully you're aware of what time it is. I mean, not in like time 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, but in sort of the grand scheme of things. We're beginning October. We're beginning the fourth quarter of 2022, which you know what I'm going to do. Targets, targets, and targets. Now, here's the cool thing. On the one hand, to me, a month and a year is really irrelevant. This idea that we only set targets or what people call New Year's resolutions. I don't like that name, by the way. That's why I use targets. This idea that we only set New Year's resolutions in January. Why can't we do it in March? Why can't we do it in April? Why can't we do it in June, July? Now, on the other hand, I do like the fact of January is 1, December is 12, right? And after 12, we repeat back to 1, right? So the fact that it gives us a breakdown of 12 months to work on, and each of those months have 28 to 31 days, and each of those days have 24 hours, right? I like that structure because it allows us to be able to take targets that we want and break them down into pieces, break them down into chunks. And for those of you that have listened, you know that I really, really like 6 months or 3 month targets because they're far enough out that we can come up with something pretty big, but they're also close enough that not only can we achieve them, but we don't have to worry if they're right or wrong because it's for a short period of time. What I find with a lot of folks, they struggle when we talk about 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year goals is they really don't know, right? That's the problem. They're really not sure what they want in 5 years. So they end up struggling, or they don't want to commit, or they commit. And then if it's wrong, it's hard to change. So to me, let's set quarterly targets. You have 90 days or 80 days, depending on when you're listening to this, but close enough, right? Hopefully you're listening to this sometime in October. So close to 3 months, give or take a little bit. What are targets that you want to achieve by the end of December? What are things that you want to accomplish? And the way that I do it is I pick one target in 4 categories: body, mindset, relationships, and business, right? Those are sort of the 4 categories that I look at. So what's something that you want to achieve in your body? Now, here's the trick. You want to come up with something that is measurable, but is also achievable. You want to make something that if you do have an off day, you can still achieve it. So I'll give you an example. A bad target for body is to say that you will exercise every day. You're going to exercise for 90 days straight. Now, yes, I know there's different programs where you do that and they focus in 75 hard and all that. And I'm all for those, and those are good. And if you are really, really locked in and loaded, and that is the most important thing to you, then go for it. I think that's important. But the problem I find with most folks is they go in and say, I'm going to exercise every day. And then something happens where you can't exercise one day, just one day, and your whole target's blown. The whole target's blown, and now you have no incentive to continue. So 2, 3, 4 weeks, something happens, you miss a day, family emergency, travel, whatever it is, and then you're basically like, well, what's the point? I've missed my entire target. So I don't like those types of goals. Now, like I said, there are places for it where if you want to do aggressive programs like 75 Hard, go for it. But typically when you're looking at these goals, you want to have them where they're pushing, but there's also a little wiggle room. So a better goal would be you're going to exercise. And once again, it depends on where you are. If you've never exercised before, and this is something brand new, you go in and say you want to exercise for 45 minutes, 4 days a week. Now you could do more, but now notice what I did. There are 7 days in the week, and you're going to commit to 4. So now you're giving yourself a safety. And I know some people like it, some people don't. They're like, well, you can't give yourself a safety. Well, you got to, to me, push yourself, but be reasonable. So now if you miss a day, you can still achieve the goal. Now you might have some weeks where you do 5, 6, or 7 days, which is awesome. But now what you're doing is you're building a new set focus that you can achieve, and there's wiggle room that if you do have an off day or you do drop the ball, you're still going to be okay there. So that's what I recommend. And like I said, you have different people with different programs. Some people disagree, going, Eric, you can't give yourself an out. But if you've never, ever exercised before, going from never, ever exercising to exercising 7 days a week, that's pretty big. I mean, that's a pretty hard thing to do. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I'd rather you do 4. So I think you get the point there, is pick something that you have a good chance of hitting, right? This is not where you want to do crazy, ridiculous off the wall. You want to build new habits on things that you can achieve, but are pushing you beyond the limit. And like I said, if you've never, ever exercised for the last year and you're going to commit to 4 days a week, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty good. So pick one target in body, one target in mindset. A good mindset is reading, right? Reading a good motivational book. Just finished it now. I actually read it twice. Really good book. Ed Milet, One More. Great book. Ed Milet's new book, One More. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Commit to reading 30 minutes a day. Or like I said, right, you want to go in, commit to reading 100 pages a week. Or pick whatever. I commit to reading a book a week. Sometimes that's easy if it's a 300-page book. Sometimes it's hard if it's a 2,000-page book. But once again, something like reading is a great mindset. On the relationships, go in and write somebody a thank you note or a thank you video each day. Very powerful. Gratitude and appreciation is a very, very valuable thing. It puts you in a good place. It helps other folks. So what if every day, and it could be a text, it could be a video chat. It doesn't have to be a formal written letter, but what if every day you commit that you're going to go in and write a gratitude letter? Or once again, in the area where you want to have a little wiggle room, what if you say you're going to write 7 letters a week? So if you know this weekend you're busy, you can write 2 letters on Thursday and 2 on Friday. These can be paragraph. These could be a few sentences. You're just sharing your thoughts with somebody. It could be a family member. If you have kids or significant other, I recommend you do each of them at least once a week. So if you have 3 kids and a significant other, that's 4, right? And then you pick 3 other people. I like to pick either folks I work with or people in business or other areas there. But once again, that's something simple, and that will help expand. And then on business, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? If you're trying to become a CISO, what if you commit to apply to 5 jobs a week? You're going to go in and find 5 CISO jobs, and you're going to commit to that. Or if you're currently in a company and you want to be CISO at that company, you're going to go in and send out an email to set up a meeting with one of the executives once a week. Now, notice the wording. I'm putting it in a way that you control. So the interviews, I didn't say you get a job, and I didn't say you go on 5 interviews, because you don't control that. But you control how many jobs you apply to. So that's why I said that. With work, yes, it would be ideal that you meet with an executive every week, but you don't control that. So if you go in and you invite executives to meet each week, that's something you control. So you want to make sure that your targets are things that you're in control of. Because if external factors come into play, it's going to be hard to meet it. But that's examples of what I do. I always have targets, and then once I have my 90-day targets, then I go in and I do my monthly targets. And then once I have my monthly targets, I do my weekly targets. And once I do my weekly targets, I do my daily. Now, if you do your targets like me, where it's you're going to exercise 4 days a week, then when you do your weekly planning, you look at your schedule and say, okay, I know I said 4, but I'm going to do 5. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The way my week is right now, I can set aside an hour each of those days and schedule it. That's the magic. The magic is schedule it. I should look at your weekly calendar, and all of your targets should be scheduled on there, because things that are scheduled get done. Think about this. If you say you want to do something and it's not scheduled, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if you wake up in the morning and 8 o'clock it says you have a call with so-and-so, you're going to take the call. You're going to follow your schedule. So the trick is Saturday or Sunday, whichever day works best for you, schedule out your week. Schedule out the 4 or 5 days you're going to work out. Schedule out when you're going to read. Schedule out who you're going to send a message to, and schedule out the hour a day you're going to spend on looking for jobs or sending out invites or whatever it is on the business side. Schedule out your day. It's one of those interesting things. They did a study, and the most successful people have their schedule the most locked in. They say if you look at somebody's calendar for the next 30 days, if 90% of it is scheduled, they are very, very focused and have a high chance of success. If you look at somebody's calendar for the next 30 days and it's wide open, there's very few things scheduled, and they sort of ad hoc it, right, and just say, hey, I'll figure it out on a day by day, lower chance and lower probability that that person is going to be successful. Now, there's a difference between busy and productive. So that's why I said there's a chance. So I know people that are scheduled out with silly stuff, right? But so if you focus on the high priority items, you pick your targets, everything is aligned with your target, and you schedule those, then you're set up for success. So here's the final piece. You review your calendar the day before. So I usually do it around 5 p.m. Most of my employees leave around 5:30. So after they leave, I go in and I look at my schedule for the next day, and I do a simple thing. Will this help me achieve my target? Every item that's scheduled. Will this help me achieve my target? Yes. Will this help me achieve my target? Will this help me? No. Why am I doing it then? Why am I focused energy and effort on something that's not going to get me closer to my target? When you become obsessed with your targets and meeting your targets, everything changes. You're at a new level of thinking and a new level of focus, where if things are not going to help you achieve your target, then it means one of two things. Either you shouldn't do it, or your target is bad and you need a new target. Right? But those are the only two explanations. Right? That's the only two explanations for something that you're going to spend time, energy, and effort on that's not going to help you meet one of your 4 targets, because the 4 targets should cover the core areas of your life. So if they're not, then you need to have better targets, or you shouldn't be doing that item. Now, in terms of being world-class CISO, this is how world-class CISOs operate. If you go and do private coaching with me, this is where we spend our time on the first few weeks. It's all about the first call we have. And some of you, I'm giving you my little play sheet so you'll be able to be prepared. It's okay. But the first call we have, within 5 minutes, if you do private coaching with me, I'm going to ask you to pull up your calendar. And we're going to go through your calendar for the next 3 months. I'm going to start off with monthly. I want to look big picture. Then we're going to do weekly. And I'm just going to go through each week and just look at what you have and ask you some questions regarding it. And that right there is going to tell me where we go, whether you're scheduled or not, whether it's aligned with targets or not. Then we're going to go in and set your targets. We're then going to start scheduling out your targets. And then we're going to go in and make sure that you're starting to make an impact. Now, talk about being world-class CISO. I'm going to give you 2 of my secrets. These are 2 of the tools that I give average CISOs that turn them into world-class CISOs. The first one is this. You need to figure out in your organization what is important and what's a priority. One of the big reasons why CISOs fail is because they're misaligned with the executive. They think this is important, and the executives think that's important. Well, what are we talking about? Well, let's review our definition of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is understanding, managing, and mitigating the risk of your critical assets being disclosed, altered, or denied access. The areas of security that we're worried about is information being disclosed, information being altered, or information being denied access to. In cybersecurity terms, what are we referring to there? CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, availability. Confidentiality is all about prevent, detect, deter, the unauthorized disclosure of information. Integrity is all about prevent, detect, deter, the unauthorized alteration of information. And availability is all about prevent, detect, deter, the unauthorized denial of access to information. So when we say our goals are to stop our critical information from being disclosed, altered, or denied access, what we're really saying is we want to focus in on confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now the question is, what percent do we focus on each? And this is where CISOs get themselves in trouble. It's not the same for every organization. Some organizations might spend 80% of their focus on confidentiality, 10 on integrity, and 10 on availability. Some might spend 30% on confidentiality, 30% on integrity, and 40% on availability. So let me ask you this. If the executives are thinking they should focus on this, and you as a CISO is focused on something different, can you see how that will cause misalignment? Can you see how that will cause problems or issues? So when I'm working, and you can do this yourself, but when I'm working with new CISOs and working with new organizations, I do 2 things. I go in and I get with the executives and I say, okay, I'm going to give you a circle, a pie. And I want you to break the pie up into 3 pieces. Of our cybersecurity budget for the company, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, COO, CFO, what percent do you think we should focus on making sure our data is not disclosed? What percent do you think we should focus on making sure it's accurate? And what percent do you think we should make sure it's focused on making sure it's available? Simple, easy terms I can understand. And most of the time when I ask the executives, they'll be like, I don't know, I guess they're all the same, so great. 33, 33, 33. So I give them a circle where 33% is confidentiality, 33% is integrity, 30% is availability. I say, is this good? And then usually what will happen is they'll start to move the bars. Well, maybe a little more here, a little less here, because remember, if you add more to one, you got to take away. That's why I like the circle, because it self-adjusts when you move those lines. So then you have a pie chart of what is important to the organization as a whole. Now, here's important. That needs to be your target, because that's what the business folks have determined is important from a priority focus for cybersecurity. Now, if you disagree with it, you really have two options. Option one, educate and adjust. Right? So educate the executives and explain to them why it should be different. And if they're like, no, Eric, we understand what you're saying, but we don't agree with you. This is what's important to us. Then your second option is go work for a new company. But if you're in disagreement with the executives on what the focus should be for cybersecurity, and you can't convince them that you're right, then staying at that organization, you'll never be world class because you're going to continue to fight with them because you don't agree. That's one of the most dangerous situations to be. If you don't agree with the execs and you can't get on board and they can't agree with you, then I hate to say it, but really the option is either have a frustrating career or you need to find a new place to work for. Or you need to learn to agree with people a little better, right? But that goes back to the first one. So that's your target. Then what I do is I look at the last 5 years on all the money that was spent in cybersecurity. So I take your cybersecurity budget, whether it was 500, 5 million, 50 million, and I put everything in a spreadsheet that has 3 columns. Was this component that you purchased or bought or service, was this more aligned with confidentiality, integrity, availability? Now it can be multiple, but I basically put an X in all of those. Then I add them up and create a pie chart. Now here's the moment of truth. I take the pie chart created by the execs, which is the target for the organization. I create the pie chart based on what you actually spent your money on, and I see how close they are. And I'll be honest with you, I already know the answer. If you have a CISO that's happy, the team is happy, the executives are happy, and they are working very, very well together, and the CISO was invited to all the executive meetings, I can tell you those two pie charts are going to be almost identical. Because if they're identical, things work smoothly. Things go very easy. Everybody's happy. But if it's an organization where the CISO's frustrated, the executives are frustrated, they're talking past each other, they feel like they're spending money and they're not getting the results, I can tell you what the results are. Those pie charts are going to be very, very different. And that's problematic. Because if what the executives think and where the money is being spent is not aligned or significantly different, can you see how misalignment is going to cause friction? Can you see how misalignment is going to cause problems or issues? Then, as I said, because you should have already fixed and got aligned with the executives, if that happens where those two pie charts are different, then you need to go in and fix where you're spending money. You need to fix the priority of the cybersecurity team to better align with that pie chart that was decided and signed off on by the executives. So that's one of my first little CISO ninja tricks. Right? It's a great way to get alignment. It's a great way to see where there's potential disconnect. And it's a great way to focus in on where you need to be spending your budget, energy, and effort. So I'm just making up because every company's different. But let's say we're in a situation where, and I'm just going to go extreme because it's easy. It's normally not this extreme. They're usually closer to anywhere between 30 to 50 for each item. But let's say you have a situation where 80% is protecting confidentiality, making sure data is not disclosed. Then you need to make sure when you're buying new tech or you're investing in projects or you're focusing the team's energy and effort, that 80% of your effort is on protecting critical data, protecting critical information, and making sure that it's kept safe and secure. So that's first thing. So once you know it's important, you have your high-level pie chart, you socialize it with your team, everybody's on board. This is the percent focus across confidentiality, integrity, availability. Then you want to go in and do what I call a mini risk assessment. Now, if you want to do a full-blown risk assessment, you can. The problem I have with full-blown risk assessments is depending on the size of the organization, they can sometimes take 1 to 2 years. I remember I had a client going, "Oh, Eric, we're in the middle of a 2-year risk assessment." And I said, "Is it for compliance?" And they're like, "No." Is it for regulatory? No. I'm like, why are you doing it? So we understand where the risks are and where to spend our money. And I think they got a little mad at me because I said, well, that's stupid. And they're like, why? So you're telling me that you're going to go off for 2 years and you're going to decide what the top risks and exposures are for the organization. And I said, yes. And I said, do you realize when you get done in 2 years, because things change on a regular basis, it's not going to be accurate. It's not going to be correct, right? And it's not going to work again. And they're like, I never thought about that, right? So I like, what a shocker, based on how I started off, right, doing this mini quarterly risk assessment. Now, big organizations will sometimes do it twice a year, but I really don't go any less than that. So small, medium, and even some large, we do quarterly. And you'll see, if you have the right team and you've done the homework correctly, this should take about a day or two. That's it. So here's what you do. You take one piece of paper and you break it into 3 columns. So you have one piece of paper, normal, 8.5 by 11. You can't cheat and do one of those jumbo pieces, right? 8.5 by 11. You do it pretty much horizontal and break it into 3 columns. The first column is, what are the critical assets or critical business processes to your organization? Now, here's the trick. Here's what makes my mini risk assessment brilliant, if I may say so myself. You only get 5 items per column. So you can't go in and put 100 things. You need to prioritize. Prioritization is key. The way you win at cybersecurity, the way you go from average CISO to world-class CISO, is by focusing in on the highest priority items. So across the entire organization, what are the 5 most critical business processes? This is one you do need the executives involved, because they're the only ones that can answer it. If you go to the head of HR and say, what's the most critical business process for our organization? What do you think they're going to say? The HR system, right? And if you go to sales, they're going to say the sales system. So only the executives can really tell you what the 5 most critical business processes are. Now, here's the cool part. Unless you go through a major acquisition or you go through a major reorganization, both of those don't happen that often, that list doesn't really change. So it's not like you have to go back to them every quarter. Every quarter, if you basically say, okay, we haven't had a major reorganization, we haven't had a major acquisition, that's still going to be good. Typically, I check in once a year just to make sure. But that first column, yes, you need executive buy-in and support, but it's good for a year. So if you're doing this quarterly, that first column, unless you add those 2 things I mentioned, pretty much are going to stay steady state. So you got that locked in, the first column. Then the second column involves the security team. So this is just you and your security team. And you're going to say, what are the 5 threats that have the highest likelihood of causing harm to our critical assets? So we basically, and here's the important part. You can't debate previous columns. So where companies go into trouble here is, I've seen this. I go to the security team and I say, okay, here's the 5 most critical business processes for the organization. I want you to tell me what the 5 biggest threats with the highest likelihood are to these 5. And they come back saying, well, those 5 aren't correct. Stop. You're not listening to me. You don't get to pick. I'm telling you what the 5 are. Don't argue with me. Don't debate with me. This is not open for discussion. The 5 critical business processes is locked and loaded. You were not invited to that party, and you are not allowed to vote on it. They are given to you. Deal with it, right? I want you to tell me what the 5 threats are with the highest likelihood are. And that's where you got to be disciplined, because security people are brilliant. Security people are amazing. And security people love to control everything and go outside their swim lane. So you got to keep your security team, especially if you have world-class security engineers, in their swim lane. Tell me what the 5 threats with the highest likelihood are. Then, once you have that column, that's locked. Then you bring in IT and you do the 3rd column, which is, what are the vulnerabilities to those systems that would allow are those threats that have the biggest impact. Because remember, risk is threat times vulnerability, and you're looking at likelihood and impact. So now you're saying, what are the vulnerabilities that are present on our system that would allow those 5 threats to have the biggest impact to those 5 systems? And because IT is typically the one configured and setting those systems up, that's why you need IT in. Once you do that exercise, and like I said, once you have the right team members and the right focus, that should take a day or two. This should not be hundreds of hours, right? Because the first part, once it's done, is good for a year. The threats are pretty much good for a couple quarters because they don't change. So really all you're doing each quarter is verifying the first 2 columns and updating all the vulnerabilities. Once you have this done, then what is the 3rd column? That's your roadmap. This is your targets for the next 5 months. These are the 5 targets for the next 3 months. So then for the next 3 months, you're focused on fixing those 5 vulnerabilities. Then if you do it correctly, at the end of the quarter, that vulnerability column is empty. So then what do? Verify the assets, reassess and update the threats, and then come up with 5 new vulnerabilities. And that now becomes your target for the next 90 days. So now we've not only talked about the targets and how to set yourself up, but I've now given you 2 magical CISO tools for making sure you're aligned: the pie chart, confidentiality, integrity, availability. And then I've also given you a mini risk assessment where you now can easily set your targets for each quarter and then focus in on achieving and hitting those targets. I always love to hear from you, so drop some comments below what you thought about this video, if there's topics you'd like to hear more about. If we can help you in any way, we do have a lot of paid programs if you want to go quicker and faster that are more accelerated. Otherwise, I'm going to keep giving you free content, right? I'm not going to stop because I love doing it. So either send me an email, ecole@secure-anchor.com or info@secure-anchor.com. Otherwise, we'll see you next week and have an amazing week. And remember, don't forget to set your targets.